All right, everyone. Hello. Welcome tonight. Thank you for joining South Florida Power BI. I want to thank our sponsors, Intellinsight LLC, as well as MCA Connect. And I want to ask everyone to subscribe to our channel here. Click on the bell to get notifications. And looks like Adriano said that we're live, so I'm going to get going. All right. So I am live now, and I am going to be presenting today about data warehouse and reporting with Power BI. And I'm excited to share this session. I got permission from my company to use some of our materials here, as well as our approach and our architecture to data warehousing. And I'm really excited to talk about essentially the data's journey that we're going to start from, like a source system like D365 or D365 finance and operations, and we're going to pull that data out, and we're going to talk about the architecture from a high level, and I'll love to get into more technical if we get questions here through chat. And then we'll finally talk about how that data gets into a data warehouse and how we report off of it with Power BI. So without any further ado, I just want to introduce myself. I'm Paul Majkowski. I'm a consultant at MCA Connect. We are a Microsoft partner. We're based out of Denver, but I'm currently in West Palm Beach, Florida. And I'm a senior consultant at MCA. I'm a Power BI developer, report builder. I work on the databases. I work with clients. I do report project sizing. Oh, you cannot hear me? Oh, okay. Adriano, I do see my mic and my aux here. I do see them. I don't know. Yeah, can you hear me? Hello? Hey, Adriano. Okay. All right, so I'm going, sorry about that. We had a little bit of a technical blip there. It looks like everything is good now, and my mic should be coming in. So again, I want to thank everyone for showing up today. I want to thank our sponsors, Intellinsight LLC, as well as MCA Connect. Thank you. I want to introduce the South Florida Power BI user group. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I'm just going to do a quick restart. It looks like we had some technical difficulties, so we'll roll right along. I want to thank everyone for being here. My main topics today are going to be data warehouses as well as reporting with Power BI. A few things about me. My name is Paul Majkowski. I'm a senior consultant at MCA Connect. MCA is based out of Denver. We do generally Dynamics 365, F&O implementations. We're a Microsoft Gold partner. So MCA does a lot of consulting, and we do have a business analytics practice, and that's the team I'm on. We do a lot of data warehouse implementations. We do D365 F&O as well as CE reporting. So that's generally my wheelhouse. That's where I've been for a little bit now. I'm generally a Power BI developer. I do a lot of report building. I also work with clients. I work in the back end on the databasing and the warehouse, excuse me, data warehouse delivery. Um, some of the things I like to do in my free time is I love gardening. I love spending time outside. I love diving, and I love to do art as well. And I've done a few sessions for the user group here, and the last one of the last sessions I did was a Power BI report about alligators in the state of Florida, and so it took a look at how the state kind of manages that resource as well as the conservation around it. So been really fun. Really excited to be here a second time and talk about data warehousing. So let's take a look and move right along. So during our session today, I'm going to really focus on the data journey. We're going to certainly take a look at how data goes from a source system like D365 CE or D365 Finance and Operations, and how we take that data and move it through this architecture here that you all are seeing on the screen in the PowerPoint. How do we dimensionally transform it from more operational data type to a data structures that are more suited for reporting. And then we'll run through all that, and we'll take a look at what it means then from that point to have our data dimensionally transformed and then plugging Power BI in so we can report off of data warehouse data essentially. So it's going to be kind of the architecture we'll refer to throughout the presentation here, and we're just going to be working in these three different sections where I'll be talking about what the beginning looks like of that journey, and doing some setup in CE and doing a load into SQL Server that's where our operational data store, doing a load into that, and then we'll at a high level cover the dimensional transformations that happen from your operational data store or your ODS to your EDW or to your enterprise data warehouse. And then at that point we'll take a look at the query, how we're going to use Power BI to extract the tables from the data warehouse, and then create some reporting about it. And we will cover some different challenges with reporting out of the data warehouse, and some really great efficiencies that we can get from data warehouse reporting. So we'll be starting here in the beginning, and throughout the presentation here and that data journey, we'll take a look at schemas, at Star Schemas and their composition, the Galaxy schema, and then we'll take a look at the enterprise data warehouse or the EDW, and we'll take a look at some structures of the data warehouse, the benefits of that data warehouse. So we'll kind of see the whole journey. We'll take a look at all those different areas, and then I'd like to pivot over and do some Power BI demo at that point and show you all doing a little bit of sourcing from a data warehouse, speak to some degree about import versus direct query. So, kind of what we use when we produce reports, and especially what works well with data warehousing and what doesn't work so well as far as the Power BI imports go. We'll take a look at some limitations that the data warehouse will have, and we'll kind of finish it off with some fact and dim table style demos there after we get it into our more reporting based data model. All right, so like I said before, I'm going to be jumping back to this architecture quite a bit. This is really important in kind of understanding, and I hope people get some value out of seeing from a higher level, kind of how a data warehouse architecture can work for someone here, and so in particular, clients or your own needs. And really, the data warehouse is fed from your source system. So your source system, in our particular case for this example, will be D365 CE or customer experience. It can be F&O. There are certainly considerations with both modes, with both applications. There's different ways that you export that data out of those applications. CE is very different than F&O. So, if you're doing, CSVs where you're doing an extraction from those, that's generally pretty straightforward. The D365 CE and F&O, there's a lot of configurations that we have to kind of keep in mind. And so we'll cover CE for this particular session because it's just shorter and it's a lot more straightforward as to how we would move that data out of our source system into an operational data store, so into this first SQL container here. And so, that's the main step, and then throughout the rest of the presentation we'll talk about that dimensional transformation, and we'll get into like Power BI desktop and reporting. But essentially in CE, we're at this step right here. We're in CE and we want to load it into the SQL server. So in CE, there will be the data export service. This is Microsoft's kind of solution for moving your data out of CE into a operational data store, or into your ODS database essentially. So we would certainly go through settings and go into the data export here. That within CE allows you to set up a data export. We're exporting out in this particular case to an Azure SQL server we have set up with our database there, with our operational data store, ODS database there. So here, this is where we would see all the data in the export profiles, and that particular export profile will represent that connection from CE where we're going to move that data into the ODS here. And so essentially what we would do at this particular part here is we would be taking a look at which entities, and this is where we would set up our export job would be in this particular part of the CE application. We would do, we would set up our job right here for CE. So this would be essentially an area where we could see our entities once that job is set up and our entities have been chosen of what we want to export on. So, we'll get into kind of more of the business transformation or kind of business analyst side of things. This is where, we would kind of think about, hey, what do we want to report on in our organization, when we're extracting this data in through the data export service here, what is our reporting gonna be comprised of, right? And so if we have certain questions around, certain aspects of the business, this is where we would, certainly ensure that we have the type of entities coming out of customer experience that we'd certainly want to report on, right? So like account or opportunity or custom entities the client might have created that they're tracking in CE. So, we would essentially use the data export service. Is pretty straightforward. I'm not going to get into a ton of details on the presentation here, but just kind of, if you all do have access to a CE environment or maybe a dev or you have your own tenant or something, you all could certainly play around with this in a CE stand-up and in like a sandbox environment and get this exporting out to an Azure SQL server. But yeah, essentially, there's the export service has a few really handy features once we get that set up. If we do custom development, like I was saying, maybe a client's custom entities, we'll have an interest in getting the entity into the data warehouse. So here when we're setting up that job that's going to move the data from CE into the operational data store, which is part of our EDW, here we could set up that export. Essentially, there maybe some configuration there. There certainly is as far as the Azure side goes. So you'll have to kind of do some research and certainly set up the capability of that export. But once you do have all the kind of connection string type things done at that point, you can go into manage entities here, and you can take a look, and essentially within manage entities you're picking your business entities, or your CE entities essentially, and you're taking those entities and you're prepping them up for export, and this data export service is going to take all that data and drop it into a database and an operational data store. And so we'll jump back to the journey, essentially the architecture here. And so like I was saying a few slides back, we set up our D365 CE export service in settings there. You'll probably have to make sure you have the right permissions and access to that system to do such, but an admin may have to do that. And so we essentially have that cruising. We've set up the timing on it, and this D365C is going to dump your operational tables into this first SQL database. And so that's going to be our data warehouse, but that's going to be our operational data store. It's going to be the entities exported from CE, just as like the most flat tables you can imagine, and they're just super wide tables, and it's all just transactional data. And so it's gonna put all of that data into our ODS, and so it's essentially imported into the ODS, and we can see the little chart here below the architecture that kind of shows the flow of what happens from it hitting either AX, so AX is for finance and operations, or external sources like CE or customer experience. You're grabbing those external sources, you're going, essentially, and appending or truncating and loading the ODS, right? And so that ODS is holding all that transaction data. And when we get into the middle of the journey, which is the next part of the presentation I'm going to cover here, the middle area is really, now that we have that ODS data from CE, that middle area is where we can do dimensional transformation on that operational data, or those transactions from CE, right? And so we're gonna begin to dimensionally transform it into a format that allows for easier reporting. Essentially, we're gonna be dimensionally transforming it into fact and dimension tables. And so what we'll be doing is taking the ODS data and creating our fact and dimensional tables in the middle here. And so this dimensional transformation is generally done with like SQL scripting. So you're going to have a lot of different scripting that's doing dimensional transformation by pulling apart base tables essentially in that ODS, and taking that data and formatting it into facts or dimensions that are then reported off of. And then those fact and dimension data is stored on the opposite side here in the Data Connect EDW, so the data warehouse. So from that ODS, you have that dimensional transformation, and then you are essentially from that point sitting in the data warehouse, and that data warehouse is what has at that point fact and dim tables after the scripting has been applied to that data. So we kind of see that progression here in this particular slide. Let's take a look. So we covered a lot of that as far as the EDW, the ODS, and the EDW scripts. Essentially just like that architecture, I've been trying to put the pieces in into there to give you all kind of an idea up to this point of what's happening to this data on its way over into the data warehouse where we'll report off of that. So essentially what we're doing is we are structuring data in a different way, and we're structuring it in a database of the data warehouse that's for reporting. And so it's the enterprise data warehouse. It's a set of fact and dimension tables that hold all that ODS data we have. So that data warehouse is fed from your CE entities, and it's certainly the way it's architected. It's capable of storing large amounts of data. It's capable of scaling very well. It allows for flexible reporting, trending, and analysis, and that's why we do that dimensional transformation, is because it does provide that not only flexibility but portability of reporting. And so not only do we have a lot of flexible reporting as far as the different use cases that we could make the data model be able to process and give good outputs for, but also provide portable reporting so that the data models are general enough that different types of analysts can potentially come in and leverage. It's we set it up to very much like we have here in this graphic, even like that fact or the sales order fact, the fact sales order. We have set it up into very generally used entities that are defined by F&O. So if they're coming out of F&O or even out of CE, the analysts that may access those models will certainly recognize the tables, and that's what kind of makes it portable. Is you have essentially tables that can be used by a lot of different agents in the organization, and they can all just be within purchasing and and your POs and your sales orders, and it's very portable because a lot of different types of analysts can essentially use those data models. It reduces data acquisition expense, and so another kind of huge capability, especially with having a structured data warehouse, is that because we're exporting, like I was just speaking of before, we're exporting from CE directly into tables. We don't have to have analysts go and hit up all these Excel sheets, or if they're they're using it potentially in some clients still access databases, things like this. The amount of money that it takes to develop a report definitely drops, because data acquisition is expensive. It takes people a decent amount of time to research and clean and gather, and if it's being performed by essentially things that aren't scripted out and really clean and have a common data model, it does take a lot of time, and you can have analysts doing much more value added or higher value work than just acquiring data. So the data warehouse is really nice for that, and it's one data source, and so we kind of covered that with the exports there. But yeah, it's one data source, so we can have all the analysts or managers or whomever is using these dashboards, they can certainly rely on that one source of a data warehouse. And so our particular approach is the Kimball warehouse. So it's made out of facts and dimensions, or the Star Schemas. And so within that data warehouse, we have generally three types of tables. We have reporting tables, we have fact tables, and we have dimension tables, and we'll get into those tables in the Power BI demo that I have. I have some tables that are sourced from a data warehouse, and we'll take a look at that, but we'll have to remember that when that data is in ODS, it's still like kind of operational data. It's CE's data, but when we're bringing it over and doing those dimensional transformations, we're splitting that data up and rearranging it into facts that contain dimension IDs, dates, and measurable values. So things like whether it's sales orders or purchase orders or their opportunities, things that are measurable that happened at a specific date, or volumes, so things like that essentially. And then the dimensions, they're more the descriptive information such as customers, items, vendors, and then we'll have reporting tables as well. And our reporting tables are like flattened tables. They're designed for a specific purpose when we meet a challenge in the fact and DIMS that we can't surmount very easily. So we generally go to a reporting table, and that's where we'll spend time up front on an ETL or an extract, transform and load, and we'll ensure that the view that you need for your reporting isn't made off of the fact and DIMS, but is a view's written for that. So we already kind of covered benefits of the data warehouse. We don't have to worry too much about that. So high level, the data lives in D365 CE. When we model that data, like when we do the transformational, when we do the transformations, we load the data into the data warehouse. We'll be using that Star Schema as I had mentioned before. And Power BI Desktop connects directly to that, essentially that fact and dimension model that we'd be creating in the EDW. Power BI will be directly connecting into that. So as soon as we, transform this data, Power BI is able to hit it in that. And, and then we'll generally just make sure we're hitting it through a gateway if that's what, is needed within the org. And we leverage Power BI service there. So again, I'll jump back to my architecture, and we will, take a look at this ODS, the operational data store. We can see a little bit of little more detail here as far as those managed entities I had showed earlier. Those show up then at that point in that ODS, like we had seen in that architecture. Account will be crm.account, so we'll have the schema and the entity name there, and so you can essentially, these managed entities from your data export service are pushed into your database of choice, and in this particular case, it's the Data Connect DW operational data store, and that's where our ODS tables are living, anything from like contract to contact to account to action card. And the data warehouse essentially will provide scripting over these ODS tables here and load the data into this EDW here that's highlighted in the photo there. We'll control that with EDW SQL agent jobs. So we run the EDW daily. So when you have a data warehouse, essentially you're also setting up not just the data export on the CE side, but you also we're running scripts daily in the morning to load data into the data warehouse here. Those scripts are they essentially load anything from like the common dim date tables to they have operations for loading our keys, and we can pick essentially which data warehouse we're loading. So everything is done by scripting here in the programmability. That's what's moving all that data around for us essentially. Some of the EDW scripts that are used to transform that data dimensionally is the EDW scripts. They're essentially within the programmability, and we have them named per per different entity. So when we're splitting dim account or fact account up into, if you do need a fact account table, when we're splitting that up into two different entities there, so we can certainly use these scripts and move our data. We see that we leverage them from the ODS here, and we just grab the data and push it into dim account or fact account. So let's take a look. So I know I just spoke a lot about like the middle here. We kind of just jumped around a little bit and took a look at some of the operations that are going on in this middle architecture here that that allow us to get into reporting and transform the data to a data warehouse EDW essentially that we have here that is meaningful and is organized and does well as far as the business jumping into to report off of it. So we've covered this middle, and I want to spend the rest of the time today talking about and doing a little bit of demo on the Power BI side. And so I have up a let me take a quick look. Yeah, so I have up, like, this would be an example of the tables in a data warehouse. And so, we could see things like, so we can, see like common dim date. So this is like our, common dim date table, and we can, take a look and see we have all our dates, everything for reporting. So when you need to leverage them to get a certain quarter or a year name or whatever for time intelligence, you can grab all that good stuff. And then here we have essentially a lot of DIMs that we've transformed, and as well as a lot of facts. And so this is what we're serving up to the analysts through Power BI, essentially to get people reporting and really try to make it more of a kind of a grassroots movement to get people using this kind of data here. So yeah, we would have here, facts, and so we could see a lot of entities from our CE system or from an F&O system. We have sales order line, after we've gone through the ODS and split and rearranged all that. We have our lines and our orders and sales invoices. We have these reporting tables I'd mentioned, the on hand, the sales exploded, sales, just different kinds of queries that were needed for the customer at that time. And so you can see our fact sales order, and these would be fields that were, things like sales order dim ID that'd be incrementally created for the fact sales order here. So yeah, this is really a lot of good data points and entities to report off of. As you can see, this is a fairly standard CE data warehouse, and it has a lot of data in it. And so, of course, we're after we're done loading and we get that data into the ZDW, that's what we are kind of looking at in my SSMS here. So if we were, fact sales invoice, it's there, it's available for Power BI. We have, and this is all masked data, but we have all sorts of stuff like the invoice dim IDs, currency DIMs, company DIMs, a lot of dim IDs to work our way back from this fact sales invoice into a lot of different dimensions. And then, of course, you have your quantities and your invoice amounts and your sum line discounts and a lot of measures. Everything is numeric on this table. And then you have your DIMs, of course, which are more descriptors. And you have, like, for example, DIM sales pool. And so you might have some orders, DIM sales order. So yeah, we have a lot of good information that came out of CE and made its way through ODS, got transformed dimensionally with our scripting, and now it's essentially in this EDW, and we're ready to start reporting off of it. So we'll generally give people access, or we'll build and then do a handoff. Then it certainly depends, but this is at that point ripe in an organization where you can start building off of this, or you can give access to analysts to start doing work off of your data warehouse. And so yeah, let's take a look at some of that reporting and what that may look like. And so I did want to do a little bit of a little more presentation, cover a few more concepts before we got into Power BI. So I wanted to just spend a little bit of time, as I know I've been talking about the Star Schema or the facts and DIMs, but I want to get a little more detail on it and why it's needed and what it's used for, essentially. And Star Schema for reporting, it's essentially data that's stored in tables that have relationships with each other. A schema is a group of related tables in a database, and we essentially generally have two categories of schemas. We have your operational, or your OLTP, and for reporting you have your OLAP. And so your operational schema stores data as it's being collected and updated. And an example is a point of sale application, most common for just essentially it's typical software applications. It's like a point of sale system, it's a CE system, it's designed for inserting and updating data. So it's not optimized for analytical purposes. It's definitely slow. The operational schema is certainly slow for reporting or analytical purposes, especially if there's a lot of data. If that data starts getting pivoted, if you're creating a complex matrix in Power BI, you'll certainly see the operational be put through its paces. And you have operational schemas, or sometimes people will use like OData feeds, and those can certainly get unruly and can provide in a slow response in reporting. But really, we're using the Star schemas because they're for business intelligence. They're for analytical use cases. They're essentially a reporting schema. You could refer to them as a reporting schema, and it's optimized for reads and aggregations. It's optimized for bigger, complex queries, and that's why we're transforming these operational data store tables into these EDW tables, is because we want to run essentially reads and aggregations on these big tables. We have bigger, more complex queries. So what does that mean? Essentially bigger, more complex queries, we're looking at use cases where you may want to look at the last 5 months of sale by a bill of materials, breakdown of an item. And so you want to know how the components are selling throughout the sales, right? And so you have a product and it's made up of components, but when we have a sale, I don't just want to know what product, I want to know what all those components that sold with that product were, so that I can essentially do work in planning for forecasting for sourcing these components and things like this. So you can imagine you need a schema that's created for being able to go out and pull down all this data, take a ton of sales orders and get an aggregation of them, and average the last 5 months by an item, based on certain rules. And so we're fact and dim schemas lend, these star schemas lend themselves well to that need, and so that they certainly are favored in most scenarios. And I just wanted to review one more time before we move on. The facts are measurable data about an event. So when we think about taking these ODS tables, you think about and like somebody updating an opportunity, that gets updated in the front end, and we are taking that data and breaking it apart and transforming it. And so we have a lot of facts around that opportunity, them working with that opportunity to make changes or do data entry. There's a lot of facts that are measurable around that event, whether it's an event with an opportunity or the kind of the opportunity, right? And so we also take a look at the dimensions, which are like the attributes or the categories that help describe those fact tables. So like item group or customer info. These dimension tables are usually smaller than fact tables because they generally facts have a lot of events, whereas in attributes or categories they're a lot smaller. And the two tables are usually related by a record identifier, so like a primary or foreign key relationship. And that's what holds that star schema together. There is describing and helping to describe those fact tables and then their relationships to that. We certainly get a really good schema for doing analysis, right? So and then you see remnants of that star schema for reporting in Power BI. You do see it when you do the edit relationships, of course. That's where we'll take a look at that star schema. So I think what I'm going to do now, I'm pretty happy with the context and what we covered, and I feel like we could certainly jump over and take a look at a report that's coming from the data warehouse. So yeah, let's take a look at that. Here we were in the SSMS looking at all this data, and here essentially we have a report that's running off of that data warehouse. And so that data warehouse has those fact and dimension tables that that we were just doing some some exercise on there. And if we come to the Power BI report that was built off of these fact and dim tables, we can certainly see them right away in the data model here. And so we can see certainly all sorts of facts and dimensions here, and then we can also see like a reporting schema table that's playing a role in the reporting, and then we can see this common dim date that's also playing a role in the data warehouse reporting here. So this is like the common dim date here for a fact production costing, or like the fact production order. So we can see this does not technically look like a star schema. This is generally when I set up PBI reports, I really like to have my dims down here, my facts up here. But when they first import, it should be a star schema for you all when Power BI does the load there. So and there's a way to refresh the layout here, so you could certainly reset it. And it looks a little bit. We have a few fact tables, so it's more of a galaxy schema. But yeah, it certainly was rearranged right here. And we could see the facts and some dims around like a true kind of star schema here. So So let's take a look, and we will talk about kind of what this report looks like, kind of how it's made up, what were some of the challenges, what's the warehouse doing for the reporting. So we'll kind of cover all that in the next 10 or 15 minutes here coming up. So essentially, that data warehouse we are looking at before was made up of these particular fact and dim tables. So when we go back, we can see, like, for example, if we bring up our SSMS here and we take a look, we can see fact production costing, and we can find we can find fact production costing right here. And so this is essentially in Power BI the data model that we have here in these tables in SQL. And then we load them by just going to get data. And I was just in my recent sources here, but you have, let me see, you do have, let's see, get data, and then you go to your SQL server. And for our setup, it's really to access our data warehouse. It's as simple as providing the server. So we'll pass our Azure server there, and then we'll provide the database. And at that point, I generally do reporting. I like to do reporting in direct query. So I certainly use that. Import is nice when you do have certain use cases. I generally go here and I always just go to direct query and I say okay, and that provides us a list of our fact and dims, just like a Power BI. When you connect to an SQL server, you'd see exactly all your facts and dims that are available, pretty much every single table here in this particular database here, and you'd be able to source those into Power BI. So all of them, just some of them, it really depends. It depends what you're looking for, and it depends what you want to do with the reporting, right? So in our particular case here, we were doing a report. We were doing a report on fact bill of materials, so the bombs, and so we were sourcing facts from the bombs as well as production orders, and then the dimensions of date, because we want to know dates of certain things, and then also the dimensions of bill of materials and of item and dim item and dim production order here. So when we went out and we wanted to source from that data warehouse server, we kind of knew, I knew I wanted to build a bill of materials report. I went in here and I grabbed all the relevant facts and dims here. So when you're working with facts and dims, it's generally fairly straightforward. If we just go ahead and take and drop a table here, just a regular table visual, and we were to go to, let's say we wanted to take a look at a fact production order, and because we're interested in reporting off of production orders, and so the fact production order will have our measurables and our dates. And so if we say, hey, we want to report on a scheduled date, so when a production order is scheduled, so scheduled date dim ID. Okay, so we can create a report off that, and we have a scheduled date dim ID. It doesn't look very good, not only because it's counting it, but also because the dim ID is just a representation of the date, essentially. So you can see 2018, so February 27th here. We certainly don't want that. Since they're dims, we want to bring in a date. So working out of a data warehouse with a model like this, we have to essentially know, hey, we have a scheduled date dim ID here from fact production order, do we have a relationship to a common dim date, so we can leverage that relationship to bring in a real date here, or something that doesn't look like this dim ID here. So fact production order, and we have scheduled date dim ID. We have to go check it and see if we have the relationship. So fact production order, scheduled date dim ID. We'll go over here. Let's see. Fact production order, and then we take a look and we find our scheduled date dim ID, and we can see that we actually don't have any dates connected to the fact production order. So we source our common dim date table that had all those dates in there, and then we can do scheduled date dim ID to and now we have a relationship. So we can actually, when we bring in the date from common dim date 2, we go up here, common dim date 2, and we can bring in the date. Oh. Huh. Let's see. I thought we could, I guess. Yep, so we can then continue to build out pretty much anything we want. If we want a quantity good, our quantity good, these are our measures coming in here, and then pretty much anywhere we have a date dim ID or any kind of dim ID, and we see that dim table here, we can create that connection between it. So we have dim item ID, for example, we have dim item here. If we have a relationship to dim item, which we do, dim item 2, so then we should be able to, in dim item 2, drop like a item ID in here, and then the item name, and so we can kind of see how that fact and dim date is working. Is we can enrich this table by just having the item ID, the item dim ID here from the fact table, but since we do have that relationship to the dimension table, we don't have to repeat that over and over again in the fact production order table. We just store it once for an item in the dim item table, and so we have item name, and we don't have to keep storing this over and over again in these transactions and have these huge unruly tables. So that's some of the advantages of doing reporting with fact and dim tables. Some of the challenges that are faced with doing things like this is when you have fact tables, for example, that have more than one date column or date field. So if you have like delivery date, but then you also have scheduled date and schedule end date, and so what happens is in the model you can only have one relationship to a common dim table. So that's why you can see in this model I have a common dim date table here, and because I'm leveraging this relationship, this date dim ID, to the transaction date dim ID here, I can't use this date dim ID again twice for another fact table. So if I were, so you could see we could do it between fact tables, but I can't bring in another field here like this date dim ID and put it up here, because what it will say is that it's not active. And so we could see through that perforated line here, and we can see that it doesn't make the relationship active, even though it knows it can be a relationship. You can only have one active relationship between this common dim date and this fact production order. We can have another one to this dim date with fact production costing, but we can't here. So if we need to get dates, from two dim ID fields here, then we know that we have to come in with essentially one common dim date table and another common dim date table, so that we can have two active relationships into two different dim date ID fields here. And so that's one of the challenges with working with like an enterprise data warehouse is you'll get into situations like that where you'll see essentially the model will need to, you'll either need to create a reporting table like I was saying earlier, or you'll need to kind of get creative with the model. The final thing I would say about working with multiple dates in that fact table there is that you can also use the DAX relationship, but the use relationship, the DAX, but it's only for aggregates. So it's something to think about. If you are looking to aggregate stuff, then that's great. Use relationship will work to get you a measure. But if you need to see it in a table view or any other kind of graphic, you will need to create multiple common dim date tables. It does create issues with filtering though, so that's something to remember. Is if you do create two common dim date tables, so that you can get two dates on this table, you do have two filters. So if anybody has any workarounds or suggestions, I mean I've looked on Google. I'd be happy to find out and see if if somebody has some ideas on how to make that better, aside from syncing filters, because you got to remember, if you create two different common dim date tables, you're probably gonna have two filters, and unless you can think of a way around that or sync them, right? So that that's something certainly to consider, as well as you got two active relationships to two different dates on a single fact table. How do you filter for those dates, right? With a single filter, make it really easy and user friendly. So that's something I would certainly challenge people. If you know, let me know. Drop me a line. Let's take a look. So the biggest thing is certainly these having two dates. Everything else is generally pretty good as far as the model goes and how flexible or agile the model is. It's generally very good. So it looks like it's about 7:30, and I think I'm about ready to wrap up. I can do a little more demo, but I wanted to ask Adriano, are there any questions so far? Alright, I'm seeing if there's any questions, or anybody would like to ask me to demo anything else. I'm happy to get into that. All right, Adriano. Well, it looks like if there's no questions and I'm not hearing from Adriano, I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight. I appreciate it. I would certainly appreciate some feedback when you all get a chance. Certainly always welcome feedback on how to make the presentation better, what topics I should cover next, or explain upon things. So, yeah, certainly let me know. I appreciate everyone's time. Thank you for tuning in, and have a safe and happy rest of the week. All right. Bye, everyone. Thank you.